I took my wife on a date and thus destroyed our marriage. The moment you start feeling that something is off in your marriage, it's usually because it is. That's what I kept telling myself as I sat in my car outside our house, staring at the front door, trying to convince myself that I was just being paranoid. But deep down, I knew better. My name is Ethan Carter, and I had been married to Olivia for 7 years. For most of those years, I had believed we had a strong relationship, built on trust, love, and mutual respect. But something changed. It started subtly. Olivia had always been affectionate, warm, and engaging, but over the past few months, she had grown distant. She spent more time on her phone, kept it face down on the table, and took it with her even when she went to the bathroom. Late-night, work meetings became more frequent, and she started wearing perfume just to go to the grocery store. The little changes were piling up, and though I wanted to dismiss them, my gut told me otherwise. I decided to test my suspicions by planning something romantic, a spontaneous date night. Olivia had been complaining that we hadn't spent enough time together, so I thought this would be the perfect way to see if her distance was truly about stress or something else. I called her office, pretending to be a client, and was surprised when the receptionist told me she had left early. That was my first major red flag. When she got home that evening, I suggested the dinner, and she hesitated, just for a second. Then she forced a smile and said, "That sounds perfect, babe." But her eyes said otherwise. We drove to La Bellevue, one of the most upscale restaurants in town. Olivia had always wanted to go there, but we had never made the time. Tonight, I was making the time. She wore a sleek black dress, looking as stunning as ever, but I couldn't shake the feeling that her heart wasn't in it. She checked her phone 3 times in the car, and when I asked if everything was all right, she simply smiled and said, "Just work stuff." As soon as we walked into the restaurant, Olivia tensed up. Her shoulders stiffened, and she quickly scanned the room as if looking for someone, or avoiding someone. We were seated at a corner booth, the dim lighting casting a romantic glow over the table. I poured us both a glass of wine, and for a moment, I allowed myself to believe that I was overthinking things. Maybe she really was just stressed from work. Maybe I had been imagining the distance between us. But then it happened. Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it for a fraction of a second before flipping it over. That was when I saw the name, Nathan. I didn't recognize the name, but the way her eyes flickered with panic told me everything I needed to know. I leaned back in my chair, watching her as she suddenly became interested in her napkin, smoothing it out on her lap as if it were the most fascinating thing in the world. My heartbeat quickened. "Who's Nathan?" I asked casually, taking a sip of my wine. She hesitated, just for a second, before forcing a laugh. "Oh, just a coworker. He's probably asking about a report or something. I'll check later." I nodded slowly, my mind racing. A coworker? Then why did her hands tremble slightly as she reached for her wine glass? Why did she suddenly look like she wanted to be anywhere but here? I decided to push my luck. "Why don't you check now? If it's work, you don't want to keep them waiting." She shot me a quick look, something between surprise and annoyance, before forcing another smile. "No need. It can wait. Tonight is about us." That should have reassured me. It didn't. I let the subject drop for now. We went through the motions of dinner, but I could tell her mind was elsewhere. She wasn't really looking at me when she spoke, and she barely touched her food. Every few minutes, she'd glance toward the entrance, her eyes darting around like she was expecting someone. And then, just as I was about to let it go, something happened that confirmed my worst fears. A man walked in. Tall, well-dressed, with an air of confidence that suggested he was used to getting what he wanted. Olivia didn't see him at first, but when she did, all the color drained from her face. She looked like she had just seen a ghost. I followed her gaze and saw the man walking toward a table near us, accompanied by a woman. That was when I realized something even more shocking. This wasn't just some guy. He was on a date. And yet, Olivia was looking at him the way you look at someone you have a secret with. A dangerous one. She turned back to me, trying to act normal, but it was too late. The panic was there in her eyes. My mind was spinning. Who was he? Why was she reacting this way? And why did I suddenly feel like I was the only one in this restaurant who didn't know the real story? I had come here tonight hoping to reconnect with my wife. Instead, I had just stepped into the middle of something much, much bigger than I had imagined. The air inside the restaurant thickened like a storm ready to break. My pulse hammered against my temples as I watched Olivia's reaction unfold in real time, her fingers curling around the edge of the tablecloth, her nails digging in as if anchoring herself in place. Her eyes darted between me and the man across the room, Nathan. I could see the sheer panic in her face. It was a look I had never seen before, not even during our worst arguments. She wasn't just uncomfortable, she was terrified. And that meant only one thing: she was guilty. I set my wine glass down with deliberate slowness, my fingers tightening around the stem before releasing it. My whole body felt rigid, like a wire pulled too tight, ready to snap at the slightest pressure. "You know him," I said, my voice steady but low. Olivia swallowed hard, her lips parting as if she wanted to speak, but nothing came out. "Don't you?" I pressed, leaning slightly forward. She hesitated for a second too long. That hesitation told me everything. "Ethan, please," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible over the soft chatter of the restaurant. "Please what?" I asked, my voice sharper now. "Please pretend that I didn't just watch you turn white as a ghost the second he walked in? Please act like I didn't see you flipping your phone over when his name popped up." I kept my voice controlled, but the anger boiling beneath my skin was growing harder to contain. Nathan had now taken his seat at a table across the room, directly in Olivia's line of sight. He was pretending not to notice us, but I saw the way his shoulders tensed, the way he adjusted his cufflinks and deliberately avoided looking in our direction. A woman sat across from him, elegantly dressed, completely unaware happening just a few feet away. I turned back to Olivia, studying her. "That's him, isn't it?" She exhaled shakily, staring at her lap as if willing herself to disappear. "Olivia," I pressed. "Say something." She finally looked up, her brown eyes glassy and wide. "Ethan, not here," she whispered. "Not here?" I let out a cold laugh, shaking my head. "Oh, I think this is the perfect place." I pushed my chair back, standing slowly. Olivia's hand shot out, grabbing my wrist in a desperate grip. "Ethan, don't." Her fingers trembled against my skin. I stared down at her, my jaw clenching. "Why not?" "Afraid of what I'll find out?" She didn't answer. I gently pried her fingers off my wrist and turned on my heel, walking straight toward him. The entire restaurant blurred around me, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses fading into white noise. My eyes locked onto Nathan, and as I approached, he finally glanced up, meeting my gaze for the first time. His expression remained calm, too calm. A businessman who thrived under pressure, perhaps. But there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, a barely perceptible shift in his demeanor. He knew exactly who I was. I stopped just short of his table. His date looked up at me, confused. "Nathan?" she asked, glancing between us. Nathan sighed, rubbing his temple before setting down his fork. "Jessica, could you excuse us for a moment?" Jessica frowned. "Excuse you?" "Nathan, what's going on?" Nathan glanced at her with a tight-lipped smile. "Please, just a moment." Jessica exhaled sharply, clearly irritated but ultimately picking up her clutch and walking toward the restrooms. Now, it was just us. I pulled out the empty chair across from him and sat down without asking, folding my hands on the table. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, but I kept my voice steady. "So," I said, studying him, "are you going to admit it, or are you going to insult me by lying to my face?" Nathan sighed again, adjusting his watch. "Ethan, listen." "No," I interrupted. "You listen. I've spent months watching my wife grow distant, hiding her phone, making excuses. I've spent tonight watching her panic at the sight of you. So forgive me if I don't have the patience for whatever corporate PR speech you're about to give me." Nathan leaned back slightly, rubbing his jaw. "Look, I never wanted to hurt you." I laughed under my breath. "That's rich. Did you rehearse that line? Or is that what you tell every husband whose wife you stole?" Nathan flinched but didn't deny it. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. "Unbelievable." Nathan leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Ethan, I know you're angry, Al." "Angry?" I repeated, my hands balling into fists. "You have no idea." I could feel Olivia's eyes burning into me from across the room, silently pleading for me to stop, but there was no stopping now. Nathan looked down for a moment, then back at me. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he said quietly. My stomach turned. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this?" I repeated, my voice dripping with venom. "So you had a plan? A strategy for how to betray me without me finding out?" Nathan ran a hand through his neatly styled hair, exhaling heavily. "I'm not proud of this, okay? Yeah? Well, you should be ashamed," I snapped. "But clearly, you're not. Otherwise, you wouldn't be sitting here acting like this is some unfortunate business deal that went south instead of the destruction of my marriage." Nathan looked away, jaw tight. I leaned in slightly. "You don't look surprised to see me, Nathan. Which means you knew exactly what you were doing every single time you touched my wife." That hit a nerve. Nathan's grip on his fork tightened. Ethan, you're a coward, I said, my voice even now. And my wife is a liar. Nathan's lips parted slightly, as if he wanted to argue, but he didn't. He had nothing to say. I pushed back my chair and stood. Enjoy your dinner, Nathan. I hope it tastes as bitter as the mess you created. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked away, my pulse roaring in my ears. Olivia was still frozen at our table, eyes wide. I stopped beside her, leaning down slightly. We'll talk when we get home, I said quietly. Then, without another word, I grabbed my coat and walked straight out of the restaurant. Behind me, I could hear Olivia's sharp intake of breath, followed by the unmistakable sound of a chair scraping against the floor as she hurried after me. She was scared. She should be, because I was done playing the fool. The drive home was suffocatingly silent. Olivia sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her hands clasped together so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She hadn't said a word since we left the restaurant. I, on the other hand, had too many words boiling inside me, fighting to be unleashed. But I held them back. I wasn't going to explode in the car. I needed her to feel every second of the pressure. The glow of streetlights flickered against the windshield as I navigated the quiet roads, my grip on the steering wheel so tight it hurt. Olivia shifted beside me, stealing a glance in my direction. Ethan. Don't. I cut her off, my voice low but firm. Not yet. She inhaled sharply and turned her gaze back to the road ahead. I could feel her unraveling, even without looking at her. Every minute that passed without me breaking the silence was crushing her more than if I had started yelling. She wanted me to yell. She wanted a reaction, because that would mean I was predictable, manageable. But I wasn't going to give her that. I pulled into the driveway, turned off the engine, and exhaled slowly. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, without another word, I got out of the car and walked toward the house. I didn't look back to see if she was following me. I knew she would. She had no choice. By the time I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, she was right behind me, hesitating at the threshold like she was afraid to enter. I flicked on the hallway light, illuminating the familiar space that no longer felt like home. Close the door, I said, my back still to her. A moment later, I heard the soft click of the door shutting. The tension was unbearable. Olivia hovered near the entrance while I moved toward the living room, shrugging off my coat and tossing it over the couch. Then I turned to face her. All right, I said finally, crossing my arms. Talk. She swallowed hard, taking a hesitant step forward. Ethan, please just listen to me. Oh, I'm listening, I interrupted, tilting my head. I can't wait to hear whatever excuse you've come up with. Her lips trembled. It's not an excuse. No. I let out a hollow chuckle. Then what is it, Olivia? An explanation? A misunderstanding? A mistake? She flinched at my last word, confirming what I already knew. Because this wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't just one mistake. It was months of lies. Olivia's eyes glistened as she searched for the right thing to say. I never meant for this to happen. I stared at her. You never meant for this to happen, I repeated, my voice eerily calm. Do you have any idea how pathetic that sounds? She let out a shaky breath. Ethan, please. No. My voice finally cracked. No. You don't get to beg me now. You don't get to stand there and act like you're the one suffering. She recoiled as if I had struck her. But I wasn't done. You had every opportunity to stop this before it started. Every time you came home and looked me in the eye, every time you lied to my face, you chose to keep going. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but I felt nothing. No sympathy. No pity. Just a deep, aching emptiness. She wiped at her face, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want to hurt you. I let out a bitter laugh. Congratulations, Olivia. You failed. She winced, but didn't break eye contact. For the first time in this entire nightmare, I saw something shift in her gaze. Something that made my stomach turn. It wasn't just regret. It was fear. She was finally starting to understand what came next. What now? She whispered. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of every decision I had to make pressing down on me. I could drag this out. I could let her cry and beg and tell me how sorry she was. But I was done wasting my time. I squared my shoulders. You pack a bag, I said coldly. And you leave. Her breath hitched. Ethan. I want you out, I continued, my voice steady. Tonight. The color drained from her face. Where am I supposed to go? I don't care, I said simply. Go to him. Isn't that what you wanted? Her lower lip trembled. I don't want that. I raised an eyebrow. No? Then why did you throw away everything for him? She didn't answer. She couldn't, because there was no answer that would change what she had done. I took a deep breath and turned toward the stairs. You have an hour. She stared at me, her body frozen in place. You don't mean this. I met her gaze, and for the first time in this entire conversation, I smiled. Oh, Olivia, I murmured. I've never meant anything more. Then, without another word, I walked upstairs, leaving her standing alone in the house she had just lost. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was heartbroken. I had already passed that stage. Not because I missed Olivia. She was no longer the woman I thought I married. I didn't sleep because I was planning. She had destroyed our marriage, shattered my trust, and betrayed me in the worst way possible. I wasn't about to let her walk away from this without consequences. The sound of her packing upstairs was like nails on a chalkboard. Zippers zipping, drawers opening and closing. The occasional muffled sob as she stuffed her belongings into a suitcase. Good. She should be crying. I sat in the living room, staring at the clock on the wall, waiting for time to tick away. She had an hour, and I meant it. I wasn't going to let her drag this out. When she finally came down the stairs, her face was pale, eyes red-rimmed, and lips pressed into a tight line. I'm leaving, she said, voice hoarse. I nodded, barely looking at her. Good. She hesitated at the door. Ethan, I held up a hand. Save it. She swallowed hard and turned away, dragging her suitcase out into the cold night. The door shut behind her with a finality that sent a strange sense of relief washing over me. I didn't feel pain. I didn't feel regret. I felt focused. Because now, it was my turn to make a move. Step 1. Take everything. The next morning, I wasted no time. First, I called my lawyer. I had already suspected something for weeks, so I had done my research. I knew exactly what I was entitled to, and I wasn't about to let Olivia take anything from me. The house? Mine. The car she drove? Also mine. The joint savings account? Well, it wasn't so joint anymore. By the time Olivia realized what was happening, every asset was frozen in my name. The house was already in my name before the marriage, and I had never added her to the deed. The car? Also under my name. She had nothing. At exactly noon, my phone buzzed. Olivia's number. I let it ring twice before answering. Ethan, she cried the moment I picked up. Why is my card declined? I can't access any of our accounts. Our accounts. I repeated, feigning confusion. Oh, you mean my accounts? Ethan, please. No, Olivia, I cut her off, my voice cold. You don't get to beg now. You should have thought about this before you decided to betray me. Silence. She was realizing. She was understanding that this wasn't going to be an easy escape for her. You can't just leave me with nothing, she whispered. Watch me. And then, I hung up. Step 2. Let him deal with it. Olivia had nowhere to go. I knew that. So where would she run? Straight to him. And I was counting on it. That evening, I got a text from an unknown number. But I knew exactly who it was. Nathan, you took all her money? I smirked. Me, that's my money. There was a long pause before he replied. Nathan, that was a low move. I laughed. Low? Was it lower than sneaking behind my back and sleeping with my wife? Me, take care of her. She's your problem now. I knew Olivia had no idea that Nathan was about to regret everything, because I had done my research. Nathan was engaged. Yeah, that's right. Olivia had been his side piece. And his fiancée? She was about to find out. Step 3. Destroy them both. I had debated for a while whether or not to do this. I took screenshots of every message Olivia had ever sent to Nathan. Every little, I miss you, and I can't wait to see you tonight. Every sneaky conversation, every confirmation of their affair. Then, I found Nathan's fiancée on social media. It took 2 clicks to find her Instagram. It took 1 message to shatter her world. Me. Hey, I think you should see this. I attached everything. And I waited. It didn't take long. Less than an hour later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't from Nathan. It was from his fiancée. Her. Thank you for telling me. I had no idea. I'm ending this tonight. I leaned back in my chair, satisfied. Olivia had lost everything. Nathan was about to lose even more. And I was finally free. The morning after everything unfolded, I woke up to an unfamiliar feeling. Peace. For the first time in months, there was no weight on my chest. No gnawing suspicion in the back of my mind. No cold pit in my stomach whenever Olivia's phone buzzed. She was gone, and I wasn't going to waste another second thinking about her. A new beginning. I made myself a strong cup of coffee and walked out onto the back porch. The sky was clear, the air crisp. I took a deep breath, letting go of the toxicity that had taken over my life. For weeks, months, I had been drowning in doubt and betrayal. But today? Today was different. Today, I wasn't a man who had been deceived. I was a man who had survived. And I was about to thrive. Olivia had tried calling me a few more times, but I didn't pick up. She sent texts, ranging from "Ethan, we need to talk," to "I never meant to hurt you," to the inevitable "you'll regret this." I ignored them all. Nathan, on the other hand, his life was in flames. His fiancée had publicly broken things off. She exposed everything: screenshots, messages, the whole disgusting timeline of their affair. By the end of the day, Nathan's name was being dragged through the mud in his social circles. Apparently, his career also took a hit. Turns out, when you cheat and lie to two women at the same time, word gets around. His business partners lost trust in him. Deals fell through. His personal life and professional life crumbled in one spectacular collapse. And Olivia? I had no idea where she went, and frankly, I didn't care. A few days later, I got a text from an unknown number. "Hey, I know you don't owe me anything, but I just wanted to thank you. If you hadn't told me, I would have wasted years with him. I hope you're doing okay. Jessica." I stared at my phone for a long moment before replying. "You deserve to know. I hope you're doing okay too." She responded almost immediately. "I am. Actually, I feel better than ever. Maybe we both dodged a disappointment." I chuckled under my breath. Maybe we did. A life worth living. With Olivia out of my life, I finally had time to focus on myself. I hit the gym more often, picked up a few new hobbies, and reconnected with old friends I had drifted from during my marriage. One night, I even went out for drinks with some coworkers. I laughed more in those few hours than I had in my entire last year with Olivia. And for the first time in a long time, I realized something important. I was happy. A month later, I was sitting in a coffee shop, flipping through emails, when a familiar voice caught my attention. "Mind if I sit here?" I looked up. Jessica. She was smiling, holding a coffee cup in one hand and a book in the other. "Of course," I said, gesturing to the seat across from me. She sat down, setting her things aside. "So, how's life after?" "Well, everything." I smiled. "Honestly? Better than ever." She nodded, taking a sip of her coffee. "Yeah, me too." For a moment, we just sat there, enjoying the easy conversation. No drama, no lies, no betrayal, just two people who had been through hell and come out stronger. And as we talked, I realized something. The past didn't define me. I had walked away from the wreckage, and I wasn't looking back. This was my fresh start, and I was ready for it. 6 months later, it had been half a year since Olivia walked out of my life, dragging her suitcase behind her, thinking she could rebuild something new on the ruins of what she had destroyed. 6 months of rebuilding. 6 months of reflection. 6 months of finally living for myself. I won't lie, the first few weeks were hell. I had spent so much time in my marriage invested in someone who never valued me, trying to fix what I thought was broken. But what I failed to realize was, some things aren't meant to be fixed. Some things need to be abandoned. And Olivia? She was one of them. For months, I heard nothing from her. She had vanished, just like I wanted. I wasn't curious about what happened to her. I wasn't checking her social media. I wasn't calling mutual friends for updates. I had erased her from my life, the way she had erased our marriage the moment she decided to betray me. But the world has a funny way of bringing closure when you least expect it. One day, while I was sitting at my usual cafe, sipping my coffee, I heard a familiar name. 2 women at the table behind me were deep in conversation. They had no idea I was listening. "Did you hear about Olivia?" My grip on the cup tightened. "Yeah. I heard she moved in with that guy, what's his name? Nathan?" I froze. I had zero interest in Olivia, but I couldn't help but wonder how that worked out for her. "It didn't last long," the other woman said, lowering her voice. "Word is, he left her a couple of months ago." My lips curled into a slow smirk. Karma really never misses. "Wait, what happened?" the first woman asked. "Apparently, he never really wanted to be with her. She was just, a side piece." My smirk widened. No surprises there. Wow. And now she's, what? Trying to get back on her feet? Yeah. Struggling, from what I heard. She's been staying with a friend, trying to figure things out. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the satisfaction sink in. She had destroyed everything for a man who never wanted her. And now? She was alone. But here's the thing, I didn't care. Hearing about her downfall didn't make me happy. It didn't make me feel anything at all, because she was irrelevant now. Nathan's fall from grace was even more spectacular. After his fiancée exposed him, his entire reputation crumbled. His business suffered, his social life imploded, and everyone who once respected him turned their backs on him. He tried to rebuild his image, but when you're known as a liar and a cheater, trust is hard to regain. The last I heard, he left town. Disappeared. Good riddance. He had destroyed 2 relationships, thinking he could walk away unscathed. But in the end, he lost everything. Where was I? Thriving. For the first time in years, I was truly free. No more suspicion. No more anxiety. No more second-guessing myself every time Olivia picked up her phone. I was finally living. I had started hitting the gym regularly, getting in the best shape of my life. I took up boxing, channeling every ounce of frustration and anger into something that made me stronger. I also focused on my career, taking on new challenges, pushing myself further than I ever had before. And my social life? Better than ever. One night, I was out with some friends, and for the first time in years, I felt light. I laughed. I smiled. I enjoyed myself, something I hadn't done in a long, long time. And that's when I saw her. Jessica, Nathan's ex-fiancée. She was sitting at the bar, sipping a cocktail, looking more radiant than ever. Her presence commanded attention, but she didn't seem like she was trying. She just had that energy, the energy of a woman who had walked through fire and emerged stronger. I hesitated for a moment before walking up to her. Jessica. She turned, and when she saw me, her lips curled into a small smile. Ethan, she said. What a surprise. She gestured to the empty stool next to her. Join me. I slid into the seat. How have you been? Her smile grew. Better than ever. You. I nodded. Same. We clinked our glasses together. There was no awkwardness. No resentment. No pain. Just 2 people who had been through hell. And now? We were finally on the other side. A lot of people think revenge is about getting even. About making the other person suffer as much as you did. But that's not real revenge. The best revenge is moving on. It's waking up in the morning without a second thought about the person who hurt you. It's becoming happier, healthier, and stronger than you ever were before. It's watching them struggle while you thrive without lifting a single finger. I had spent too long being consumed by Olivia's lies. But now, she was nothing to me. And as I sat there, talking to Jessica, laughing, enjoying the night, I realized. This wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of something better. Something real. Something mine.